Welcome everybody to today's diversity session. My name is Hinkelmann and I work on the experiential marketing team with Microsoft Germany, and I will be your host today. And we are very happy that we could win Diana Kelley, who is the Field Chief Technology Officer of Microsoft Corp. And today we will talk with her about her career past, her personal story, as well as her experience on diversity in the workplace. And we are also super grateful to announce the German community of women in technology who will co-host the session today. And for you, if you don't know them yet, they will give you a short intro just right now.
Very
quite
brave.
difficult with these Krücken or crutches anyway. Yeah, welcome from Women in Technology as well. Women in Technology is a community of professionals across the world who really believe that it's easier for women to imagine, to begin and to develop a career in IT industry. It's a joint initiative of IMCP and WPG. It's the International Association of Microsoft Channel Partners and the Worldwide Partner Group. And we're really growing. Yeah, it's just more than, started with 3 local chapters, and now it's more than 50 chapters of Women in Technology all around the world. And it's really a very open network, so you're all invited to come and join us. The mission we have is to provide a network for creative and innovative people in the Microsoft ecosystem and to support each other. And there are a number of goals behind this mission, which is really to build a global community, which is to provide mutual support each other in achieving personal or business-related goals, to increase the number of young women following a career in IT industry, and create new opportunities for all of us. The German chapter was founded about 2 or 3 years ago. Margit, you've been involved from the very first beginning, and we've done a couple of events so far. So we regularly meet at the German Partner Conference at the DPK, and we got great speakers there, and it's always a good opportunity to network. But we also do events, like we did one where Generation X meets Generation Y. We did one on change management, which was really funny because this was the very first event where we had a man speaking, and he was very excited. I remember Jürgen up the stage, and he was like, "I'm so excited." And he was like, "Why are you excited?" "Because it's only women." And we were like, "Well, this is our reality." So that was really a wonderful experience, vice versa. And we did a third event just a couple of weeks ago at Microsoft in Schwabing, which was about mentoring. And one of the participants said that it's already kind of mentoring if you come and join the network. So you're all very invited to come and see me after the session, and I explain you how to get on board. So, Hannah, back to you.
Okay, thank you very much for the intro. I guess now everybody knows who Women in Technology is. And now we will hit it off for the interview with Diana. And Diana, to start with, we have an easy question for you.
Okay.
So have you ever been in Germany before? And if yes, what is your favorite city?
Yes, I've been here many times, both for just to travel as a tourist and also to work. And I think that my favorite city is the first city I worked in Germany, which is Munich. I used to manage a global team of network administrators, and we had a group in Munich, and I just have really fond memories of, it was one of the first big jobs I had, so being able to go there and to work with the team, and I think I said this to you the other day. I remember sitting on the floor with the router in front of me, trying to figure out why the DNS wasn't working back to the US, and I just just have great memories of that first experience. So Munich, but I love Frankfurt. I love all of Germany.
Thank you, very nice. So as a next step, you have a lot of responsibility in your current role. Can you maybe tell us a bit more about it and what it exactly involves?
Sure. So this is a new role at Microsoft, and we created it when I joined Microsoft a few months ago. I came to the company in September of 2017. So I've got a 30-year experience, close to 30 years in IT, but again, fairly new to Microsoft. And my focus has always been on security. And so we're really leveraging the different parts of my career here at Microsoft. I have, as I just mentioned, I managed a global network. I have consulting implementation experience because I was a manager in financial services at KPMG Consulting. I was an analyst. I led the analyst team and security and risk management strategies at Burton Group, which is now Gartner for Technical Professionals. And I've got experience on the vendor side. So right before Microsoft, I was 5 years at IBM as their global executive security advisor. So if you look at sort of the way that we implement and deploy technology and cybersecurity, there's the vendors, there's the analysts who try and listen to the vendors and then talk to the implementers, and then there's the implementers, the people who actually are buying the products and doing it. And since I've done all three, we really brought that into this role. So I go out, I talk to our customers, to our C-suite, to the CISOs about their strategy and what their plans are and where they want to go and take themselves in their next step of digital transformation. I also work with the research team on the security intelligence report, which is I think it's twice a year report coming out from Microsoft that brings together all of our learnings about all this great data that we have both from our security graph and from our Mystic, our group that does the reverse malware, our DCU, digital crimes unit, and then our DART detection and response team. So bringing all the learnings across the different areas at Microsoft together into a twice yearly report so that you can understand really the state of cybersecurity right now, what the attackers are doing. So it's great to work with them on basically creating the stories because there's a lot of data, but data in and of itself doesn't tell a story. You need to be able to pull out the learnings from that. So that's a great part of what I do. And I do a lot of public speaking and evangelism, just getting the word out about why it's so important, because I am just really passionate about cybersecurity.
So you also talked a lot about public speaking. Could you maybe explain how a typical day for you looks like, or is there no typical day as such?
Yeah, there's usually a plane involved, and I can tell you what I did today. I did some editing and work this morning at the hotel room, and then I came here. I did a talk at one of the other clouds, tents, clouds, and then I talked to a customer here. I went over to a bank and talked to them at their site and their headquarters, and then I came back here to have this conversation. So that's not an unusual day. Last week, though, I was in Israel with our security product team, learning about their roadmaps and what we're doing for the products going forward, and having conversations, bi-directional conversations about what we've seen in the field. With the executive security advisor team, what we've seen in the field, talking to product and learning about where they're taking the products next, so we can kind of make this a joint effort. So it really does vary.
Okay, really good to know. And how did you get into this field? I mean, cybersecurity. How did it happen? And what was the trigger initially for you?
Getting into technology was an absolute passion. My father brought home a Texas Instruments calculator, a TI calculator, that was programmable when I was 9 years old. And he brought it home, and I think he kind of thought my brother, who's 3 years older than me, was going to be really super interested in it. And my brother was kind of like, but I got really fascinated. I'm like, oh my gosh, I could make it spell hello and things, So I was really excited about programming. And then when computers, so this is the 70s, everybody. This is the 1970s. It was not like it is today. And then computers started to, there were people were putting together computers from kits. And my dad, because he was a MIT research professor, working out of Lincoln Lab, got an account, and I could dial in. And when I say dial in, I mean dial in. It was a rotary phone, and and I would go and put it into this coupler. And now I was on the DARPANET, which was the initial internet. And there were not many computers, but there were some in the Cambridge area, MIT, some in DC, some out in California, like University of Berkeley, and some over in the UK. And I thought, oh my God, this is amazing, because I could talk to people on the system. There was email, there was IM, believe it or not. This is 1978, 79. It just, to me, I was like, it was all, of course, green screen, but I was like, this is the future. This is completely amazing. I loved it. But when I went into an actual career, I brought that, and when I went into an actual career, I brought that forward as a manager of networks and bringing together networks and learning how to code. And somebody got on, finally I worked my way up and I managed this global network, and they wanted to distribute their software patches and updates by FTP. And I thought I had this great system and I was all excited, and somebody got onto my network. And it's because I didn't understand how to secure that FTP properly. So it was my fault because I did not understand the security side. So I went at that moment from being a computer tech, network guy, to being a security person, because more than anything, I wanted to protect the network, protect the data, protect the company that I was working for. So I just got really fascinated with that, and because I'm good at thinking about how to break things, I can be really pretty strong about thinking about how to defend them. So it's just a complete, absolute passion of mine, and went from networking and apps to defending networking and apps.
So you just talked about how the industry transformed
Yeah.
From the 70s until today. And I think it would be really interesting for all of us to understand how you transformed as well with it. I mean, now dealing with all these high-profile situations that you have coming back from the 70s. So I think it would be really good to know something about your own personal transformation there.
Yeah, I think that my appreciation for the personal, for communication, and for sales really, really increased over time, because when I got started and I was younger, I thought it was all about the technology. Right? Technology is going to solve all of our problems. Who wants to talk to people? I don't need to talk to people. And sales, bleh, what sales? It's all about, let me just sit down at a keyboard and figure this out, because that's going to be the absolute answer. And as I got more experience, and I can tell you this is another fail in my career. At one point, I recommended to a client that they implement a firewall that was running on Unix rather than on NT. We're going back a while again. Because at that point, the particular product products we were talking about, it was more secure on Unix than on NT. Well, their administrator didn't understand Unix at all and misconfigured that firewall after I had set it up, and it actually caused some very minor damage, but it did cause damage, and it's because he was so uncomfortable with Unix. So I made a recommendation purely on technology, without taking into account the person that was going to be managing that technology. So that really transformed me, because I realized you have to take in the people, understand the culture of the company, understand the way that those people are, and also to understand that as you're trying to bring people forward in security, in cybersecurity, we used to call it IT, cyber's kind of a new term, that part of it is sales. Because people have to really want to be secure. They have to want to use security. They have to, if you're even asking for a second factor of authentication, even when it's really easy to do, like just with your fingerprint and saying, here's my second factor, you still have to get those people to take that extra step. And so part of it is engaging, understanding its people, and also understanding that if you want to get people to adopt something new, sometimes you've got to sell them. Sales isn't bad. Sales is engaging people in their own transformation and change.
Super nice. And I mean, now you have talked about how you moved forward, but have there maybe sometimes also been situations where you couldn't proceed as fast as you wanted to go, or has there been a particular thing or person that blocked you in your progression?
I think that overall in the field of security and adoption of security, one of the biggest challenges has been the mindset of, we have to do this. So again, another story from my past was at one point our mail server ran out of space. So I had to buy a new hard drive. I mean, this is back before the cloud and basically infinite storage and all that. So I had to buy a new hard drive. And the hard drive showed up, and the president of the company came into my room and said, "Oh, your gift is here. Your present is here." And I was like, "This hard drive is not for me. This hard drive is for the company because we're having issues with not having enough space and storage, which is a risk of not doing business, which is part of security." So I think it's just really that aspect of we have to do security. Security are the people that are kind of the bad guys rather than, and it's true, sometimes there's this great business idea. I mean, think about even moving to the cloud. The business was so super stoked in general. Look at what we can do, and we can save money, and we can do all these extra things that we haven't been able to do before, and the security people are like, well, hold on. What are they doing to limit access to that data and stuff? So we're the ones that are always kind of saying that hold on. So I think that's been sort of the biggest challenge, is to really talk through with organizations and to sort of engage everybody with security. It's all of our jobs, really, but to get people excited about it and not just seem like the bad guys that are saying, no, that's not safe.
So now we talked a little bit about your past career. As next, I would like to proceed to go over to the topic of today, diversity. And you're known to manage a global team internationally with a lot of people, and that obviously involves leadership, coaching, and developing people. How do you pay attention to diversity and developing and coaching an open mindset into people? Are there difficulties when doing that? And could you maybe describe some to us?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing to encourage diversity is to listen. Because in security, there are a lot of different viewpoints. The attackers have their own viewpoint, and we as the defenders have our viewpoint. And as we're figuring out what a company needs to do, or even where to take an organization like Microsoft, when you're thinking about what's the cybersecurity direction, there's no perfect answer. Right? If I could sit down and say, hey, there's only one right way to do cyber, I mean, we could all go home, right? We're like, not like, but like game over, right? There's not one perfect way. There's different ways for different organizations, for different geolocations, for different cultures, and so it's really important to have a diverse team that can bring all of those, the different viewpoints to bear, the different location, specifics to bear. I mean, we even looking at an image. So we were talking about an infographic just the other day. And depending on how you see colors, if you're colorblind or not, where you live, the shapes within that infographic could have one meaning or another meaning. But if you're just looking from one set of eyes, you're not going to be able to understand the different interpretations. So it's really critical as you're looking at all aspects of cybersecurity, or any team, to bring that together, to bring those different viewpoints, to bring those different visions in there, and to listen to other people and how things are impacting them. I mean, it's a tough sport, the act of cybersecurity, and there are no right answers. So the more you listen and the more you bring in those different voices, the better you are.
Okay, so if I understand you correctly, diversity is very important, especially in cybersecurity, and sometimes, however, also it might be difficult and conflicts can arise.
Yeah, I mean, when I worked at Burton Group, we used to have this saying where reasonable people may disagree, right? And, sometimes reasonable people may have disagreements about, how to do something, how to accomplish, a goal. So there are times when, especially if you have a lot of chiefs involved, when you have at the C level of an organization, or when you're talking to the board of the directors, right? They're all kind of like super people. I know everything. So you kind of have to, when it's a younger group or a group that doesn't have quite as much, experience, maybe it's a little bit easier to say, hey, let's bring this all together. But when you've got a whole bunch of people who are like, I am super person, then you got a whole lot of chiefs, and everybody really has a very strong opinion. So there's often times when you got to just have everybody take a deep breath and step back. And most importantly, remember when there's conflict that you're reasonable people disagreeing. So always respect each other, and to know that we're trying to accomplish the same thing. If you're working for a business, your goal, your big meta goal, is to make that business successful. And if you kind of hold on to that, and that means sometimes letting go of your ego, and letting go of there's only the one right way to do it, to step back and say, look, we respect each other and we share the same goal, that can really help, because it's when we stop seeing all the differences and latch back onto the really important end state that it can really help to move people forward and hopefully stop some of the definite, although sometimes some good stuff comes out of disagreement too, you do learn.
And if we now dig a little bit deeper into diversity, specifically being a woman in a male-dominated world, have you had particular situations where you felt that this had been a disadvantage, or even was there a situation where maybe somebody told you you are only here because you are a woman? Is there been a situation like that?
Yeah, so it's interesting. When I started in this field, there were about 9%, 10% women in IT and security. And guess what that number is now? So here we are, almost 30. Yeah, 9%, 10%. Yeah, so we're still... There's progress, no. We're still here. Yeah, we made it. So it's been interesting, and it was a male-dominated field. It continues to be a male-dominated field. When I was getting started, I did experience sometimes that there was a little bit of surprise, that because I'm not super big and I am a woman, so I would go into a meeting and it'd be me and 15 guys at a table, and the thinking was, well, she's not gonna, what is she? Is she taking notes or something? Is she supposed to get coffee? And so I sort of took people off guard because they didn't know the depth of my technical experience. So that was sort of an interesting kind of like turning it back around, because then I got kind of used to that. I'm like, oh, they don't know, they don't know necessarily that I'm actually going to have a lot to contribute technically. And I did have one experience where I gave a talk on the PCI data security standard when it was first released. So it's pretty technical. You guys know what the data security standard is? It's 12 steps of the security requirements if you store, process, or transmit credit card data. It's pretty technical. It's very prescriptive, and it was brand new, so people didn't know it very well. And I had this talk that I was so proud of, because I went through these steps of how to implement it. I'd been working with the org in advance, so I knew really deeply about how to do this right. And gave all this great technical content. Finished the talk, and I said, any questions? And the first question I got was, and I am not kidding, and it was a German who said this, said, yeah, what's it like being a little girl in a man's world? And I was like, really, this is it? This is your question? After all that? Because I was so proud. After all that, that was the question. But you know what? I think you kind of got to step back and laugh. I mean, I said, hey, that's an interesting question, but let's stick to the technical content. What's funny, I think the oddest thing for me is that recently, in the last year, I have started to hear sort of rumblings about, that person got the job because she's a woman. Or, well, they just want to be diverse. So it's kind of gone. We're still 9 or 10% in the field, but now there are accusations of women. Before it was, oh, she's not technical enough to do it. Now we're getting accused of, oh, you just got that because you're a woman. So I don't know. Over time, things change, and for me, and I think for anybody who's practicing, it's about doing the work, knowing your job, doing it well, and continuing to improve yourself. And kind of when you hear those noises, just going, hey, I know what I'm doing, and staying true to your path.
Great. Okay. I think some awesome learnings from that. Very nice story about men saying something like what is not related to the technical nature of the topic, and how that makes one feel. I think that's a great thing to share to everybody. But now I'd like to bring the discussion a little bit more into the future. And you in particular are interested about ethical values and cybersecurity. And what do you think? How will it change? And what kind of ethics do we need to consider in this current debate? And with such rapid technological changes?
Yeah, so I mean, ethics are absolutely critically important, and privacy and taking into account privacy is important. It's always been important. As a network admin, sometimes you had privy to very private data of an organization, emails that are private, right? So it's been, for people who've been practicing for a long time, this has always been true, and I feel like, a moral code of ethics has always been important if you have access to your sensitive corporate data. What's changed is that our sensitive data is being generated constantly. We're generating right now information about our location. Somebody might have their microphone on and we're all like speaking into it, not just being recorded here. I mean, so the data, the critical data, the sensitive data has gone from being a very small amount, maybe on a mail server, to it being in many, many, many places. We're collecting it, we're saying we're anonymizing it and collecting it in data lakes, but sometimes if you start stacking that data back together, you can be able to identify who the information is about, even if it has been properly anonymized, just because the certain right amount of data and information can lead back to the actual person that it was originally about. So there's a lot, right? There's a lot of stuff that we have to manage from a data perspective, that we're all collecting all over the place, bringing them into these storage, these data lakes. So we now, as nations and as corporations, have to take into account the ethics. And that's what things like GDPR are about, just making us accountable and letting the people whose data that is be able to go back and have control over it and say, I want to make sure it's accurate. I want to know how you're using it. I have a right to be forgotten if I want to be forgotten. So it's gone from this tiny group of people that needed to be very ethical to essentially anybody who's storing data and managing data. That means all of us, all companies and nation states really need to think very, very hard about the privacy and the information that we've gotten and how we use it.
Okay, and also going a bit deeper into the field of cybersecurity, what do you think in the next years will be the trends to be expected, and how can all of us prepare to stay ahead and to be, on top of the current trends?
Yeah, okay. So number one, how many people here have passwords that you've used more than once? Yeah, I used to. I do, I admit it, I used to. Not anymore. So number one, for everybody is just don't reuse your passwords. It seems really simple, and I know we've got hundreds of passwords, right? I actually have a password vault, and I've got hundreds of passwords in there. Use a password vault. Generate your passwords. We as users, this is really important, and if you want to bring that right back into business, many of us use our passwords in the corporate world. We like those passwords. During the Yahoo breach, I said to someone I know, I said, did you have a Yahoo account? Did you change your password? And she said, oh, but it's my favorite password. Right? So, do you have a favorite password? That's right. Well, so that's so multiple passwords, change it. And there's also, yep. So don't reuse.
Yeah, my question was that Microsoft has a new technology now that they want to remedy the passwords in the systems. So they are using, for example, Microsoft technology will be Windows Hello, for example, or Hello for Business. And in Apple it will be, I think, Face ID in this case of this. So everybody can keep his favorite password, but the technology is behind it to protect this in this case.
Yeah, so there's also future technologies. So change your password because you're using your password outside of the Microsoft estate, don't forget. Microsoft is working very, very hard on the other parts of authentication so that we don't necessarily have to go back and reuse passwords. So looking at things like conditional access, where you are, the device you're coming from, and identifiers like Windows Hello for biometrics and fingerprints through the FIDO Alliance. So that's really, and that was my second point, was going to be, wherever possible, use that second factor of authentication, because that's really very, very important. Because if somebody steals your credentials, if you have that second factor, they're not necessarily going to get in. Another, like, sort of looking at a little bit smaller than big enterprise, which is where I'm going to go next, is ransomware is still, nothing succeeds like success, and the attackers are still out there with ransomware, so the organizations still really need to make sure that you're patching and you're backing up, because there's going to be more ransomware this year, and there's just going to be as much ransomware as they can get effectively. So until we're robust against it and resilient, they're going to keep going. But what I'm super excited about is bringing more of AI and machine learning into the space of cybersecurity to be able to detect if somebody's coming in, if something's anomalous, if there's an attack underway or a campaign, much, much more quickly than we're doing now. You think about the vast amounts of data that we're collecting, it can be very hard to sift through it, even if you've got a SIM system. So we need to get smarter about that. We need to use artificial intelligence, use machine learning to be able to really go through that information much more quickly and to find those very small changes and be able to correlate them so that we can start to understand this is a change I need to really take advantage of, and then provide additional detail and telemetry and context to the analysts who are then hunting down what that anomaly may be so that they can figure out if there's a problem and go and chase it faster. And so I'm really excited about some of the changes because we've been getting bigger and bigger security data piles and telemetry piles, but now we're really starting to see some great forward movement in helping the analysts be able to get through that much more quickly thanks to deep learning.
Thank you so much. Amazing. Okay, so now we have 15 minutes left, and what we want to do is have a little bit more of an interactive discussion. So if you have questions for Diana, this is the right moment to hand up, and I will come and bring you the microphone. Any questions already? Okay.
Hi, thanks Diana for giving those insights and sharing your career path with us. My name is Mona. I'm also working with women tech makers and digital media women here in Frankfurt. And I was wondering, in terms of networking and networks, did you have any networks, like access to any female networks in your career, or is that something that you see arising like now or in the last 5 years? What would be your advice for others?
Yeah, so early on, no, I was networking, but I was networking with other, technologists, and it was not, gender-based. But I was one of the founding members of the Executive Women's Forum in the United States, which is a networking group of executive women. Surprise, after that name. And there have been, absolutely, in the last 5 years, there have been more and more groups like this one that really help to bring women together, both inside of their organizations and outside. And I've made some great friendships, and I think that it's really been very, very helpful to get that perspective. And there are networking groups that are just women only. There are networking groups that promote women and diversity, but are very inclusive. And I think just going forward, it's really, to me, it's mostly about networking with a really diverse group as much as possible, and places where people can be encouraged, because I do know that sometimes people who are in a minority feel very discriminated against, and certainly that in some instances that does happen. So it's really important as you're growing your career that you have a place where you can talk about those feelings and be able to bring them up. So yeah, some of these diversity groups are really very great, really great for that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next question.
Hi, I'm Esther Donitz from T-Systems, and I'm interested in hearing your view on the combination between security, especially, for example, predictive security, artificial intelligence, as you mentioned it, and biases based on gender. Because what you can see in here is that, for example, there are robots being built already, which are very much looking like the dream woman of, I don't know, of a porn, you know, of the Playboy or so. And this is also part of the coming reality of artificial intelligence, as well as predictive maintenance, which often uses algorithms which are, you know, not coming from anywhere, but also being produced by people. So that would be my question. How do you see this as well, and are you taking influence in such developments?
Yeah, so I think it's very important to understand that systems can become biased. And sometimes when you look at, you know, learnings or objective learnings, you can see a bias in there that you may or may not want to teach the system. So an example is in the United States, based on a person's color, you're more or less likely to be in jail. Now, does that say, is that looking at something that is based on already, you know, bias itself because of why that occurred? You know, so if the machine doesn't know that maybe there's a past that's impacting that, and may just start assuming based on someone's color that they're going to be more or less likely to be in jail. So it's really important that we understand how we're training the system so that we don't let them have sort of a false bias, and also that they don't develop a bias that's inaccurate over time. So, you know, when we talk about AI and machine learning, it's like, oh my gosh, the rise of the machines, and I've read some of these future books where robots are going to be creating the next generation of robot and fixing themselves, and suddenly we're just like out of the picture. But if you look at, which may be in the far enough future, but when you look at today, when we talk about deep learning, very often it's a system that humans feed data into. It then figures out how to analyze that and weight that in the black box, and then some analysis comes out, and a human looks at that analysis to make sure that it's not getting off kilter and not getting biased. And so I think that that's going to continue to be important. And in cybersecurity, the reason it's so incredibly important that a human stays involved is that attackers know how to train a system that something isn't anomalous. If you go low and slow and you can train a system, it could learn that the anomaly or the attack pattern is normal. So you want to really be very cautious in cybersecurity that you continue to understand, even though in the deep learning it's a black box, that you understand what's going in and look at what's coming out, so we're making sure that we're not missing something or creating false negatives out of that system. So it's going to, you know, both of those are going to be really important going forward.
Do we have another question? No? Okay. Oh, here. Perfect.
I know you talked about working with international teams or teams all over the world, in Munich, in the US, and all over the world. I guess I was wondering if you've noticed different attitudes towards women in technology in different cultures, and how you kind of deal with those situations.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing that I've noticed, though, is it a little bit culturally, but age. So age really does matter. You know, the younger people are less likely to be biased against women, and I've had some examples with older people that really, they're like, well, women can't do technology. That's just crazy. So I think that that's more than anything. It's been the age. You know, I do see pockets sometimes in one country or another, but the biggest thing that stands out is that the younger we are, the more we're accepting that, hey, everybody can do math, everybody can do, you know, everybody can do technology.
Okay, thank you so much for the questions. As an outro, I have one last question for you. So, if you were to turn back the clock, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Yeah, I would say hold on. It's going to be a crazy ride, and that's because where we were in technology versus where we are, I had no idea that there would ever be discussions about, you know, cyber war. and that nation-state attacks, that an election in the United States could potentially have been changed because of, Russian trolls. Like, these are things that are just, I thought the biggest thing was going to be, we got to keep the data safe at the banks, because if we're going to have our banking online, and now I'm kind of like, wow, that's like a whole different, we are talking, actually loss of life. So it would just be, hold on, because this is an important job and it's only going to get more and more important, but it's going to get a little bit overwhelming, because the size and the scope of where cyber and where software and where technology touches us now is just mind-boggling.
Yeah, okay. As long as we are not thrown out, we can have one more question.
Yeah, just one more question. If you had one word of advice for young women today, in the same position as you were back then, what would that be?
Yeah, passion. It would be, absolutely, it would be passion. I don't think you're ever going to be successful in any career unless you're passionate about it. This career, I know, it's like there are a lot of late nights, there's a lot of work, there are people not thinking you can do it. We're never going to fix it all. Just whatever you do, you follow your passion. I worked with somebody who was a CTO and came out of MIT and one day got up and said, I'm not passionate about this, and is a doctor of acupuncture now and incredibly successful and so happy with it. So no matter what your path is, follow your passion, you'll be successful at it.